Jackson stepped into the marble-lit lobby, dust clinging to his boots, hoodie creased from a red-eye flight. The chandeliers above cast warm light, but the atmosphere froze the moment he approached the front desk. The manager, Clara, scanned him once, head to toe, then reached under the counter, discreetly tapping a button. 2 uniformed security guards appeared at the end of the hall. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her eyes said everything. "You don't belong here." Jackson stood still, hands calmly resting at his sides. 20 minutes later, she would be gone. Her title erased. Her legacy shattered, in front of the same eyes that quietly watched her now, but no one knew that yet. Not the guests sipping wine in designer coats, not the staff who glanced away, not Clara, who smiled slightly as the guards approached. Because in their eyes, Jackson was just another man out of place. In his, this was a test they were all about to fail. Jackson Wade, 38. Founder and CEO of Jackson Hospitality Group, a $3.2 billion empire built from the ground up. Hotels in 11 countries, dozens of awards, hundreds of staff who never knew his face, by design. 2 days ago, he finalized the acquisition of the Grand Royal chain through a series of holding companies. Quiet. Intentional. The ink was still drying when he booked his suite under a corporate alias. No one here had any idea the man they were about to escort out owned the building they worked in, the contracts they signed, the uniforms they wore. That was the point. He didn't need a red carpet. He needed the truth. And the only way to find it was to walk through the front door unnoticed. Behind the worn jacket and tired eyes stood the man who just bought their world. But Clara didn't see that. No one did. Yet. 3 days before his arrival, Jackson had booked the penthouse suite under a subsidiary account. No titles, no flags, just a quiet entry in the reservation system. His assistant, Sarah, handled the paperwork, rerouted communications, and ensured the front desk wouldn't be alerted. No press release, no internal memo, just silence. He'd done this before. There's only one way to know what kind of culture you've bought: walk into it blind. The plan was simple: observe, test, document. Not as a CEO, but as a stranger. Unimportant, unimpressive, invisible. If a system treated people poorly when it thought no one was watching, it was broken. This wasn't a visit. It was a controlled failure. And Jackson wanted to see exactly who would fail first. He wasn't looking for perfection. He was looking for truth. And the Grand Royal was about to show him plenty. The leather jacket was worn at the elbows. The jeans, dusty from a long walk. His backpack, scuffed, frayed at the edges, hung off one shoulder like an afterthought. Jackson didn't look like someone checking into a 2,000 a night suite. He stepped through the revolving doors into crystal lighting and polished marble. Instantly, heads turned. Quiet murmurs drifted from velvet lounge chairs. One man lowered his newspaper. A woman raised her glass slightly, whispering to the friend beside her. Not a word was spoken directly to him, but the message was loud. "You're not one of us." Jackson kept walking, steady, deliberate. Each step echoed louder than the last. It wasn't hostility, just something colder, curiosity dressed as condescension. This was exactly what he needed. Not the fake smiles for VIPs, but the raw, unfiltered reaction to someone they thought didn't belong. He didn't flinch. He took it all in. The young receptionist hesitated, fingers hovering just above the keyboard. She opened her mouth, unsure whether to greet him or question him. She didn't get the chance. Clara stepped in from the side hallway, heels clicking sharply against marble. Her eyes barely paused on Jackson before her voice cut the room clean. "This is a private property," she said coolly. "We don't allow walk-ins." Jackson met her gaze without blinking. "I have a reservation. Under Jackson Group." Clara didn't move, didn't ask for confirmation, didn't look at the screen. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, as if studying a misplaced object in a luxury store. There was no raised voice, no scene, just a quiet assertion of power, hers, and a calm rebuttal, his. But behind his steady tone was the first ripple of annoyance, and behind her smile, a certainty. This man doesn't belong here. She just didn't know how wrong she was. Clara didn't move toward the monitor, didn't ask for a name. Her arms folded neatly across her chest as she offered a clipped response. "I think you've got the wrong place." A soft chuckle came from somewhere behind Jackson. Another guest leaned in to whisper, amused. A third shook his head, smirking into his drink. The tension wasn't loud. It was slow, creeping, contagious. Jackson's expression didn't change. His voice stayed level. "I'd appreciate it," he said evenly, "if you'd check the system." Clara tilted her head again. "There's really no need." He could feel the room watching, judging, not with hostility, but with quiet dismissal, the kind that says, "You've already lost. Don't make it worse." But Jackson didn't step back. He stood still, not because he needed validation, because he needed proof of exactly this, and Clara was handing it to him one word at a time. Clara's tone sharpened, polished with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We have a certain standard here," she said, slow and deliberate. "You may be more comfortable somewhere, less particular." The sentence landed like a slap wrapped in silk. Around them, the quiet became performance. A younger man in loafers muttered just loud enough, "He probably wandered in by mistake." Laughter followed, subtle, restrained, but no longer private. A shared joke at Jackson's expense. Jackson didn't respond. Not with words, not with posture. His silence wasn't surrender, it was containment. Letting the moment build, letting them reveal themselves fully. To them, his quiet meant weakness. To him, it meant data. Every smirk, every turned head, every glance not met. This wasn't just about Clara anymore. It was about a system that approved her in real time, and it had just exposed itself. Without a word, Jackson reached into his jacket and pulled out a sleek, matte black card. Heavy, unmistakable. He placed it on the counter, face up. "Centurion, no limit, by invitation only." Clara didn't blink. She gave it a single glance, then smiled like it was a child's trick. Anyone can get a fake these days. A sharp inhale rippled through the room. Even the receptionist flinched. Someone near the back let out a low whistle, not amused, just stunned. The air shifted. Dense. Tight. Like a wire stretched 1 second from snapping. Jackson didn't move. His hand remained beside the card, still, composed. He hadn't come here to impress anyone, but he wasn't here to be erased either. Clara's words weren't just insulting. They were revealing. She'd seen power and refused to recognize it. Now he knew. She wasn't making a mistake. She was making a statement. Jackson kept his voice level. "I'm asking you, one last time, to check the system." Clara didn't respond to him. She turned to the side, pressed a button on the counter, and spoke sharply into the radio. "This guest is creating a disturbance. Please escort him out." Her words were clipped, efficient, like logging a routine complaint. The receptionist, Ryan, froze. His fingers hovered above the keyboard. He looked at Jackson, then at Clara. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. He knew something felt wrong, but authority was in front of him, staring, expecting compliance. In the distance, footsteps approached, measured, heavy. Security. Jackson's card still sat on the counter, untouched. He didn't look at Clara now. He looked at Ryan. And in that second, Ryan realized this wasn't about a guest. This was a test, and he was already part of the answer. The elevator dinged. 2 security guards stepped into the lobby, calm, composed, built for presence. Clara didn't even look at them. She simply pointed. Ryan's voice broke the silence, quiet but strained. "Sir, are you absolutely sure you made a reservation?" Jackson turned toward him. His eyes didn't flash with anger, only clarity. "I'm sure," he said evenly. "Penthouse suite, 3 nights, under Jackson Group." Then he added softer, "And I'm making a point to remember every face I've seen tonight." Ryan blinked. The guards paused behind him, waiting for a signal. Clara gave a sharp nod. Ryan didn't move. His hand was still near the keyboard, but he didn't type. Something didn't fit. The way the man spoke, the way he stood, the certainty. A seed had been planted, and in Ryan's hesitation it started to grow. Something here was wrong, and it wasn't the man in the hoodie. The guards moved in, firm, professional, wordless. One gestured toward the exit, the other lightly touched Jackson's shoulder. He didn't resist, he didn't speak. No one in the lobby intervened. Clara's voice followed him, crisp and loud, meant for every ear in the room. "He's impersonating a VIP guest. We've had issues like this before." Phones lifted, screens glowed. A few guests angled themselves discreetly for better shots. It wasn't outrage, it was entertainment. A disruption to pair with their cocktails. Jackson walked slowly, hands visible, posture controlled. Not shame, not fear, just silence. His eyes swept the room as he passed. No judgment, just memory. A woman near the bar whispered, "That's what happens when you try to fake your way in." And the guard beside Jackson muttered quietly, almost apologetically, "Sorry, sir. We're just doing our job." Jackson didn't answer. He was already memorizing the script they were writing for their own downfall. As Jackson approached the glass doors, a guest near the fireplace leaned toward his companion and whispered, not softly enough, "How did he even make it past the front desk?" No answer came, just a quiet snort of agreement. Across the room, a woman in pearls discreetly lifted her phone and snapped a photo. No flash, no shame, just another moment to be saved or shared. Clara stood near the reception desk, arms crossed, watching like a director satisfied with her final scene. "This," she said, not hiding her satisfaction, "is why we have standards." The word standards echoed. Jackson kept walking, but he heard everything, every whisper, every click, every smirk pretending not to be seen. No one questioned Clara. No one asked if she'd even checked the system. They didn't need proof. They had perception, and perception here was gospel. Outside the revolving doors, Jackson paused beneath the hotel's golden signage. The night air was sharp, but his voice stayed steady as he raised the phone to his ear. "Sarah," he said, "schedule a full board call. 20 minutes. Send the press release." There was a short silence on the other end. Then he added, calmly but pointed, "And make sure someone captures every face in that lobby." He ended the call and slid the phone back into his jacket. The humiliation still clung to him, not because of the words, but because of the silence that followed them. The looks, the ease. But he hadn't come to be respected. He'd come to see who would fail when no one was watching, and they had. Effortlessly, publicly. Now it was his turn. Not to react, to respond, with precision. Jackson disappeared through the revolving doors without a word, leaving only the soft hiss of glass and the faint echo of footsteps behind him. Inside, Clara accepted a few quiet nods and smug smiles from nearby guests. One older man even reached out to shake her hand. "Good call," he muttered. "Can't be too careful these days." Clara smiled, polite, victorious. But behind the desk, Ryan sat still, fingers now resting on the keyboard he hadn't touched before. He hesitated, glanced once toward Clara, then typed, "Jackson Group, Penthouse, 3 nights." The reservation loaded instantly. Confirmed. Corporate tier. Flagged VIP. Ryan stared at the screen. His throat tightened. Everything he'd felt was now spelled out in black and white, and he hadn't done anything to stop it. The mistake wasn't just Clara's. It had a witness. And now it had a record. Ryan clicked deeper into the reservation file. Jackson Group. Executive tier. Booked 3 days ago. Note: CEO level clearance. His eyes widened. Slowly, he opened a browser and typed, "Jackson Wade." The search results populated instantly. News articles, interviews, Forbes profiles. At the top, Jackson Wade, CEO of Jackson Hospitality Group, acquires Grand Royal Hotel chain in $400 million deal. He clicked one. There it was, Jackson's face. Same worn jacket, same calm expression. Ryan's breath caught. "He's the CEO," he whispered, eyes still locked on the screen. "He owns this place." He looked up, stunned. Clara was still chatting with guests like nothing had happened, but Ryan's world had just flipped. The man they'd removed wasn't some nobody. He was the reason their paychecks existed, and in 20 minutes he'd be back, with everyone watching. The revolving doors turned once more. Jackson stepped back into the lobby. Same jacket, same steady walk, but something had changed. Not in him, in the room. Silence swept across the floor like wind through glass. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. A wine glass clinked too hard against its saucer and cracked. One guest fumbled with their phone, dropped it. Another whispered, "Is that?" Eyes turned, faces shifted. Recognition flickered. Behind the desk, Ryan didn't breathe. His voice came out low, almost involuntary. "He's back," he said. "He came back." Jackson didn't speak, didn't look at anyone for long, just walked straight toward the desk like nothing had happened. As if this was his lobby, his floor, his stage, because it was. And now, everyone who had performed their roles 20 minutes ago would learn what it meant to be seen by the man who wrote the script. Jackson walked with quiet precision, stopping directly in front of the front desk. He looked at Ryan, not accusing, not cold, just steady. "I believe," he said, voice calm but unmistakable, "you still have my reservation on file." Ryan swallowed hard. The screen was still open in front of him. He didn't need to type, didn't need to search. He nodded slowly. "Yes, sir," he said, voice barely holding. "Penthouse suite, 3 nights. Confirmed. The words landed like a dropped stone in still water. A couple nearby looked up, brows furrowed. Another guest glanced toward Clara, waiting to see her face. Jackson said nothing more. He didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He simply reclaimed the space with presence alone. The man they tried to erase now stood where they'd refused to see him. But this time, the room couldn't look away. And Ryan wasn't the only one trembling. Clara's voice cut through the tension like glass shattering. "What is he doing back in here?" She strode forward, sharp and indignant, eyes blazing with authority she no longer held. Jackson didn't look at her. He didn't flinch, didn't acknowledge the noise. Instead, he reached into his jacket, pulled out a single black business card, and placed it gently on the counter. The silver lettering caught the light. Jackson Wade, Chief Executive Officer, Jackson Hospitality Group. No words, just the card. Clara stopped mid-step. The desk clerk beside Ryan gasped, a quiet intake of air like a fuse catching fire. Somewhere in the room, a phone dropped. Jackson still hadn't looked up. His silence said everything. "I don't need to argue. I don't need to explain. I just need you to read." And now, Clara was the one being watched. Clara's face drained of color. Her voice cracked slightly as she reached for denial. "Anyone can print a business card." It was weak. Everyone heard it. Jackson, calm as ever, pulled out his phone and spoke clearly into the receiver. "Sarah, patch me into the boardroom. Speaker mode." Seconds later, a voice echoed through the lobby, crisp and unmistakable. "Mr. Wade," the voice said warmly, "welcome to your new flagship property. We've been expecting your check-in." The words hung in the air like a dropped verdict. Ryan looked down. A guest near the elevator covered their mouth. Another slowly sat down, as if unsure what to do with their hands. Clara stood frozen, her world unraveling one syllable at a time. She had questioned the card. She couldn't question the voice. And now, every excuse she'd prepared no longer mattered. Clara turned slowly, scanning the room, as if someone might step in, speak up, explain this away. No one did. Guests who'd nodded at her minutes earlier now stepped back. Phones lowered. Eyes avoided hers. The same lobby that had validated her authority now withdrew from it. Behind the desk, Ryan exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for hours. Quietly, he leaned toward his colleague and whispered, "We made a big mistake." Jackson didn't look at Clara. He looked at the room. "I didn't come here for revenge," he said, voice even and unshaken. "I came to clean house." No flourish, no theater, just clarity, cutting and sharp. He hadn't needed to raise his voice. He hadn't needed to demand respect. He'd let them choose how they treated him. Now he was choosing what came next. From Jackson's phone, now resting on the front desk, the speaker came to life, loud enough for every ear in the lobby. "This is the executive board," a voice announced, formal and sharp. "We are monitoring the situation at Grand Royal, and yes, press outlets have already picked it up." The room shifted again. Even the air felt heavier. Clara's breath caught. Her hands, once confidently folded, now trembled at her sides. Her eyes darted toward the exits, then back to Jackson. He turned to her, tone calm, surgical. "Still want to follow protocol?" he asked. "Or shall we create a new one? Together?" Clara didn't answer. She couldn't. This was no longer a misunderstanding. It was an indictment, spoken through speakers, heard by witnesses, backed by the people who now held her fate. And for the first time, she understood. She wasn't in control anymore. Jackson didn't raise his voice. He simply turned to Ryan and spoke clearly. "Pull the guest complaint records last 12 months. Filter by management actions." Ryan hesitated, then nodded, typed, and hit enter. A list filled the screen behind the desk. 17 entries, all linked to one name, Clara Langford. 17 documented complaints, Jackson said, letting the number settle. "In 1 year." Clara stepped forward, voice shaky but defensive. "Those reports are exaggerated. Most of them came from misunderstandings. You can't take them at face value." Jackson didn't blink. "And the 6 payouts?" Clara froze. Ryan clicked again. 6 settlements appeared, discreet, sealed, dated. "This isn't a pattern," Jackson continued. "It's a practice." The lobby was silent. The numbers were louder than any accusation. No opinion, no speculation, just facts. And Clara was standing in front of them, exposed, alone, and finally out of excuses. From the side of the lobby, a woman in a housekeeping uniform stepped forward, quiet, hesitant, but firm. She yelled at me once, she said, almost in a whisper. No reason, just because I was in her line of sight. Clara opened her mouth to respond, but Jackson raised a hand, not to her, but to the room. He turned slightly toward the security camera above the front desk, speaking not just to those present, but to anyone watching. If you've experienced the same, he said, voice steady, you're not alone. You're not invisible. Now is the time to speak. A pause. Then one hand lifted, then another. A concierge, a valet, a server. One by one, quiet acknowledgments. Clara's gaze darted from face to face. Recognition, then panic. The silence she once relied on was breaking, by the very people she believed would stay quiet forever. From near the fireplace, an older woman stepped forward, composed but tight around the eyes. I had a confirmed suite here last spring, she said. Got a call the morning of, telling me it had been reassigned due to maintenance. But I know why. I didn't look like the other guests. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Ryan tapped into the system, typing quickly. Reservation history confirms it, he said. Room was reassigned. No maintenance logged. No alternate reason noted. Clara's voice snapped in, sharp and defensive. I was protecting the brand. Our image matters. We can't just... Jackson turned toward her, not angry, just surgical. You're calling discrimination policy. Clara's mouth hung open, words caught behind instinct. What she once called standards now had names, stories, timestamps, and the brand she defended had just become Exhibit A. Jackson finally turned to face Clara fully, his voice low but resonant, cutting through the marble air with purpose. I used to mop floors, he said, at the first hotel I ever built. Clara blinked, uncertain if she'd heard him right. I've carried luggage, changed linens, scrubbed bathrooms. I know this industry from the ground up because I started at the ground. He took a step forward, not to intimidate, but to be heard. No one gets to decide someone's worth based on whether they walk in wearing Italian leather. Silence settled in, this time heavy with respect. I didn't buy this hotel to change the lobby, he continued, voice firm. I bought it to change the mindset. A pause. And that change starts now. The room didn't clap. They listened. Because leadership isn't declared in titles, it's proven in truths. You're no longer afraid to say aloud. Outside, the first news van pulled up to the curb, logo painted, camera crew already unloading. Then another. Flashbulbs began sparking against the hotel's glass facade. Inside, the staff phones buzzed simultaneously. Push notifications. Breaking. CEO Jackson Wade makes unannounced appearance at newly acquired Grand Royal Hotel. Someone whispered, "It's on the news." Another added, "It's everywhere." On Twitter, the trend climbed fast. Hashtag Grand Royal Truth clips of Jackson being escorted out were already circulating, contrasted now with footage of him calmly dismantling Clara's narrative. A split screen of power and consequence. Guests in the lobby looked down at their screens, then up at the man still standing in front of them. This was no longer a management issue. This was public, and what had been brushed off 20 minutes ago was now a headline, a hashtag, a reckoning. Jackson stepped forward, his voice now directed to the entire lobby, no longer quiet, no longer testing. Effective immediately, he said. All internal policies at Grand Royal will be made public. No more hidden rules, no more protected behavior. He tapped his phone, placed it on the desk again, and spoke into the call. Jennifer, termination file for Clara Langford, immediate execution. Send confirmation to legal and staff channels. The lobby froze. On speaker, the HR director replied, Understood. Sending now. Clara's breath hitched. Her voice cracked as she stepped forward. This is a setup, she snapped. You planned this. But no one spoke up for her. The silence was louder than any accusation. Jackson didn't respond. He didn't have to. Because for once, a system that punished the powerless had just turned itself against the powerful. The voice from HR returned, crisp and final. Clara Langford's employment has been terminated. Documentation is signed, time-stamped, and distributed to legal, operations, and front-of-house systems. At the desk, a junior staff member hesitated, then reached for the keyboard. With one click, Clara's profile blinked onto the screen. Her name, title, and system access were still active. He hovered over a small red icon labeled Remove, then pressed it. Ping. The sound was soft, almost anticlimactic. But in that moment, it carried the weight of every ignored complaint, every dismissed warning, Every moment, someone had been made to feel small. Clara stared at the screen. Her name vanished in real time. No applause, no confrontation. Just a quiet, irreversible deletion. The same system she'd used to gatekeep had just closed its doors on her. The lobby stood still. No murmurs, no footsteps, just the sound of a breath held too long. Guests and staff watched Jackson, not like an audience, but like a jury who'd just seen the verdict delivered, and now waited for what came next. He let the silence speak, then broke it gently. "We're going to rebuild this place," he said, "from the ground up, not with fear, with decency." He turned to Ryan. Their eyes met. "You," Jackson said. "You hesitated. That matters more than people think." Ryan stiffened, unsure if it was a reprimand. Jackson added, "You might do better than the last one." The words landed with weight and possibility. It wasn't a promotion, not yet. But it was a door, one that opened not with titles, but with accountability. For the first time that day, hope entered the room. Ryan lowered his gaze, voice quiet but clear. "I'm ready," he said, "and I'm sorry for staying silent when it counted." Jackson nodded once, not with praise, but with understanding. "You're not silent now," he said. "That's what matters." No more needed to be said. Outside, the flashing of camera lights began to dance through the lobby windows. Crews had gathered, tripods raised, boom mics extended. The building, once a sanctuary for appearances, was now a spotlight for truth. Inside, Ryan stood taller, not out of pride but responsibility. He knew the weight of his earlier hesitation, but he also knew this moment meant something different. A clean slate, a second chance. Jackson stepped slightly back, letting the light fall on the one who had just stepped forward. From this point on, the world would be watching, and they weren't just watching Jackson anymore. Cameras surrounded the marble foyer, their red lights blinking in unison like a heartbeat. Microphones stretched forward from every angle. Reporters called Jackson's name, voices overlapping, urgent. He stepped into the center without rush. No podium, no cue cards, just presence. "I didn't come here to fire anyone," he said, eyes scanning the crowd. "I came to keep the people who deserve to stay." Click, flash, silence. Then he added, voice firm but calm, "Power means nothing if it's never tested." The line hung in the air. A sentence not just spoken, but carved. Phones lit up, tweets fired, hashtags shifted. Someone near the back whispered, "That's going to live forever." He wasn't just addressing the press. He was speaking to every employee watching from behind doors, every guest still lingering in corners, and every leader who thought silence meant safety. It didn't. Not anymore. A reporter raised her voice from the cluster of press, mic extended forward. "Mr. Wade, why didn't you reveal who you were from the start?" Jackson didn't hesitate. "Because I don't need anyone bowing when I walk in," he said. "I need them to serve with integrity when they think no one's watching." The room went quiet again, not from tension, but reflection. Behind the desk, Ryan stood silently, watching. His eyes didn't move from Jackson's face. Slowly, he nodded to himself, no longer out of fear, but pride. Jackson hadn't just called out broken systems. He had modeled what it meant to lead, without title, without spotlight. Real leadership doesn't walk in wearing a badge. It walks in wearing humility. And sometimes, it starts with the man holding a mop before ever holding a microphone. From the edge of the lobby, a woman in a housekeeping uniform stepped forward. She moved carefully, her hands still gloved, eyes uncertain. She stopped a few feet from Jackson and spoke just loud enough to be heard. "Thank you," she said, voice trembling, "for doing what no one else ever dared to." Jackson looked at her, not above her, not through her, just at her, and then, without a word, he gave a small, respectful bow. No grand speech, no applause, just acknowledgement. A camera clicked, then another. The flash briefly lit their silhouettes, CEO and cleaner, shoulder to shoulder in the same light. That photo would travel everywhere by morning, not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. In a hotel built on appearance, this moment had nothing to prove and everything to remind. 1 week later, CNN aired a morning segment. Jackson Wade removes controversial manager, announces system-wide overhaul at Grand Royal. Footage rolled across the screen. Jackson's silent re-entry, Clara's dismissal, and the press conference that followed. Back inside the lobby, a new bronze plaque was mounted near the entrance. Guests paused to read it as they passed. In a place once known for judging appearances, Only those who show respect remain. No signatures, no branding, just truth. At the front desk, Ryan stood behind the counter, tie straight, posture steady. A small tag on his lapel now read, General Manager. He didn't boast, he didn't perform. But the way he welcomed a guest, eye contact, genuine smile, spoke louder than any press release. This wasn't about redemption. It was about stewardship. What Jackson had started, Ryan now had the chance to carry forward. The CNN segment cut to a now familiar clip. Clara, mid-protest, face flushed, voice cracking as Jackson calmly announced her termination. Below the video, a bold caption scrolled across the screen. The cost of attitude. Online, the clip exploded. 12.4 million views in under 48 hours. Comment sections flooded. That's how it's done. Finally, a CEO who walks the talk. She judged the wrong man on the wrong day. The internet wasn't outraged. It was relieved. In a world saturated with corporate apologies and half-measures, this moment stood out because it wasn't manufactured. It was real. A man humiliated without cause. A system flipped in real time. And justice, not whispered, but delivered publicly. Not for the sake of drama, but because someone finally decided that silence was no longer part of the job description. A week later, Jackson sat across from a podcast host in a quiet studio. No stage lights, no teleprompters, just a glass of water and a single mic. The host leaned forward. You didn't have to go in undercover. Most CEOs would have sent a memo. Jackson shook his head. I didn't do it for optics, he said. I did it so every employee in the system knows. Someone's watching, but this time the right way. The host paused, thoughtful, then added, and the guests? They're finally being seen the right way too. Jackson didn't nod. He didn't need to. The host did. Slowly, respectfully, and for a few seconds, the mic captured nothing but silence. Not emptiness, understanding. In a world full of noise, Jackson had said more by doing than most ever would with words. On screen, a handwritten letter faded into view. Ink soft, edges slightly creased. A calm, middle-aged woman's voice began reading, I've stayed in many beautiful hotels, but this was the first time I felt like I wasn't just welcomed. I was respected. This place doesn't just have chandeliers and marble, it has character. As the words unfolded, the screen showed Jackson walking quietly across the lobby. Slow motion, no grand gestures. Just him, passing by a bellhop with a nod, pausing to return a smile from a guest. No background music, just footsteps and the fading sound of paper turning. Thank you, the letter concluded, for reminding me that kindness can be part of luxury. No hashtags, no trending tags, just truth. Some reviews are written online, others are written in silence, by the way a space makes people feel. The lobby had returned to calm. Guests checking in, staff moving with quiet purpose. Jackson stood near the front window, watching the city breathe outside. His assistant approached, tablet in hand. So, she asked gently, what's next? He didn't turn, just kept his gaze forward. There are still places, he said, where people think no one's watching. A pause. We're going there next. She nodded, already knowing, already ready. The screen faded to black. Then, white text appeared, bold and simple. Coming soon. Dignity check, episode 2. A subtle underscore hummed beneath it. No drama, just direction. Not every fight ends in one building. Not every system changes overnight. But someone, somewhere, had just been put on notice. And the next lobby was already waiting. The screen fades in quietly. No music, just soft ambient sounds. A new day at the Grand Royal. A bellhop shares a quiet joke with a guest. A barista hands over coffee with both hands. A manager listens, really listens, to a staff member explaining an idea. Faces of every kind. Languages, accents, smiles that aren't scripted. Then, at the bottom corner of the screen, a single line appears. Serving isn't about lowering yourself, it's about lifting others. No narrator. Just stillness. Then, a soft voice, almost like memory. If you've ever been misjudged, if you've ever been told you didn't belong, you're not alone. The screen lingers on a porter holding the door for a couple in matching wheelchairs, both laughing. No hero music, just real people. And a sense that somewhere, someone finally got it right. Jackson stepped through the glass doors of the Grand Royal once more. Same marble floor, same chandeliers. But everything felt different. This time, as he walked through the lobby, heads didn't turn in suspicion. They turned with recognition and quiet respect. Staff members nodded, not because of his title, but because of what he stood for. A doorman straightened his jacket. The receptionist greeted him by name. Jackson gave a simple nod in return. No smile, no speech, just presence. Earned, not demanded. Then, a final message. Subscribe if you believe respect should come before a business card. No need to explain anything more. The story had already said exactly what it needed to.